Game begin.
Hello and welcome to episode 10 of the Spy Colony podcast. I am Lanny Huang. I am the Beatdown, here with Michael J. Flores, the Control, harkening back to the start of Spy Colony podcast when we were all in the car and I thought I was the Control.
Yeah, it turns out you even know how Control works.
I don't.
For those who don't understand that, listen to Spy Colony number 9, and you too will be like, I thought this guy played like prison decks.
Okay, let's try to do a maximum of 15 minutes on the PSS because I don't want to just do like I don't know. I guess we'll see where it takes us. There's like maybe some cool deck lists that got published. The monthly's going on. We could look at those. But quick recap of the PSS. Rich Shea out with the fever. So he was unable to play Mike Arnold on Thursday. The first matchup was Will Hurst bringing Burn against Jeff White's Goblins.
So we talked about I mean, just forget about if it's about the PSS or anything. We talked about this matchup last week, and I said I don't think that this matchup is just mono Burn like some people, aka Caffeinated 22, seem to think that it's just like all Burn all the time. I have definitely lost from the Burn side.
Yeah, and so did Will. Basically,
Will was destroyed from
the
Burn side.
The things that happened were some combination of Will not drawing lands and Goblin Ringleader just completely dominates the game. You
can't play Gear 2 if the opponent like has 2 Ringleaders. Just not gonna happen.
That's correct.
Well, maybe you can if you have an uncontested.
If you have Curse Scroll.
Or Lavamancer does a good job of it too. But like I watched this and I was just like, Will's just never really seemed in it to me, right? Like he was playing checkers, you know?
Yeah, and we were we along with the commentators were pretty surprised that Will didn't choose to bring Fluctuator. I think he got way too in his head about Jeff's multiple Tormod's Crypt in his sideboard.
But I think that's just Will's just never played Fluctuator deck enough. Like, who cares about Tormod's Crypt?
Yeah. I mean,
it just literally doesn't matter.
Flint outlines how to play around Crypt pretty well in his guide, but I think that Will just kind of like felt like he could just get like Wasteland Cryptid. Like, I think he like thought that Jeff White was going to open his hand and it was going to be Mountain Crypt, Lackey, Wasteland, Siege Gang, Pile Driver.
Well,
and he was just like, well, I can't beat that 7, so I'm not going to.
You're not supposed to beat every hand,
and
right? But like
Flint actually did get raced by goblins at LobsterCon, and he lost to a Siege Gang commander off the top or something. So it's not like cut and dry. And for what it's worth, I think if you put Fluctuator versus goblins at probably around 75%, like two players who know what they're doing.
Well, but game 1 is like 95%.
Yeah. Game 1 is free.
So
and then
even if you're like, even if you give the Goblins deck like 65% in sideboard games, which I don't think you should, right? Like then,
you're gonna catch
30% and 95%.
Well, game 1 isn't free because you always have like the 10% Multi Oblivion and lose. So,
I mean, yeah, that's why it's 95%, not 100%.
Okay, fair enough. And then, the bigger thing is that Fluctuator. Which we thought was going to take 2 easy wins in the PSS, instead took 2, is likely going to take 2 losses because Will can't line up Fluctuator against Tom's Dreadnought Landstill combo or Rich Shea's setup of blue-white goblins. If he's scared of goblins, Rich has it too, and Parfait. Which Fluctuator obviously can be Parfait, especially since Rich doesn't have access to Melee Mage. But Rich is just going to bring Dreadnought, and then it's not going to matter.
Well, wait, who does he play first?
First, he plays Will Hurst plays against Tom, so he's pretty much a lock to play Stasis against Tom because Fluctuator cannot compete with Tom's 2 remaining decks in Landstill and Blue White, and then. And then Rich afterwards. So Rich, we don't know what he's going to pick against Mike Arnold because he has to make up that game due to illness. That's probably going to happen today at some point, or maybe between now and Thursday. And so unfortunate spot for Will. That knocks him down to 2-2. So,
But he got a freebie against you when he did not correctly play his burn deck against your setup of decks that can't be burned.
Yeah,
but he got you with the stasis instead.
Yeah, he did. Jared Doucette played against Alvaro Galindo. Jared's Goblins defeated Alvaro's Panza. Pretty wild considering how much spot removal and like pyrokinesis and like, you know, whatever was.
I missed that match.
It's fine. So it's like a carbon copy of the burn matchup with just like slightly different cards. Because once again, Goblin Ringleader just gets you out. And Alvaro's Panza deck just, we've been saying the same criticism the whole PSS. It just doesn't seem to turn the corner and like put a clock on.
Yeah, but if you're not, I mean, if you don't have your opponent in the hurt locker, like they're in the hurt locker, right? Like, I mean, nobody's afraid of pillage.
Yeah.
Like that's just, come on, man.
Yep. That is
pillage versus Goblin Lackey is not a good matchup.
Yeah.
He has other cards that might be good against Goblin Lackey, but if that guy hits you one time, it might be too late.
Yeah, he's got Firebolt, Firebolt Mog Fanatic. That was like his action.
Let's talk about the third match of the PSS
all right.
this week. That was a good match.
So Tom pulls out the rock, pulls out me rock against me.
I think like it was predictable. Like this was the ode to Lanny Rock week.
It was predictable. And when we had discussed it, we're like, I mean, you were like, there's no way Tom picks a rock. I actually knew for a fact that Tom was going to pick the rock. I couldn't line my...
How did you know for a fact?
Because it was very clear to me that Tom would have me... Well, one, Tom just has to dodge replenish. But if Tom has two reads. One is that he either knows that I'm going to make him miserable by playing Parfait.
Sad panda.
Or two, that I'm going to play Grotog because he knows that like I love Grotog, and he maybe thinks that I don't want to run Grotog into the rest of my week. I think the read at the end of the day was the truth, which is that I can't run Parfait against my following 2 weeks of Jeff White and Jared Doucette because both of them have access to replenish. And despite Jeff White losing in week 2, or week 1, I forget. It might have been week 1 to Parfait. I don't think that the matchup is good for the Parfait player. I think that just in general, Replenish has plenty of tools to defeat Parfait, and it's just kind of an easy matchup for Replenish under normal circumstances, as long as your draws basically cooperate. Rock versus Parfait. I thought this matchup was pretty winnable from the Parfait side. I think I made it look winnable.
I mean, it's winnable from either side. If I had to stake my life on it, I would say Parfait has the advantage. You have banned land tax. I mean, let's be honest, right? So game 1, you did everything that makes people miserable. I think Tom played too long. He eventually conceded.
No, he wanted the viewers to see me wish for Haunting Echoes. Like he was just like, well, Lanny worked so hard on this deck. I should just like let him do it.
Game 2, I think like it was a combo of Tom being on the play because he had lost game 1. But I mean, he did kind of showcase how if you're playing cards like Enlightened Tutor and you're like kind of like Land Tax itself is like a -1 card until you go +3, right? So if you're like -1 from Enlightened Tutor, -1 from Land Tax, then your first +3 is getting you just barely past your negatives. Then it's only after that you really start to go. And then like the scroll rack is like not even a 0, right? Like all these cards are pretty bad in isolation. If the opponent has, I don't know, 16 disenchants and 4 duress and 4 Cabal Therapy. And also he was like a radar scanner on his Cabal Therapies. He hit good.
I think he named pretty correctly. Like the only possible name was in game
1.
Game 3, I played turn 1 Land Tax. I played Gemstone Mine Land Tax. He did Cabal Therapy, and he had the choice to name Scroll Rack, Oath of Druids, or Enlightened Tutor.
I would have named Enlightened Tutor in that spot. What did he name?
You always name Enlightened Tutor in that spot. He named Scroll Rack. He correctly named Scroll Rack. Scroll Rack was in my hand. I think that
Oath was also in your hand, is that right?
Oath was also in my hand. Tutor was the only one that wasn't in my hand. You would have just went.
I would have named the one that wasn't in your
And it would have mattered. I mean, I don't even know how much I want to go into this because I talked about it a lot in the post game, and I still haven't digested. But if you pay close attention,
listen to our podcast than watch the live.
That's true, but the thing is, if they're listening to the podcast, and they lack the context of what happened in the PSS.
All right, so let me just talk
then.
The so on turn 2, Lanny has the combo, and Tom plays the second land. The jig is already up when Tom plays the second land. It's obvious to anyone who's paying attention that he has a naturalize in his hand. But Lanny, who's a genius, sacrifices his very stable genius, I should add, sacrifices his windswept teeth so that he can tax on his upkeep. But like Tom only played the second land
so that he can
because he had a naturalize. So now Lanny just stone rained himself to get naturalized and never came back.
Yep.
Just never had an open source of green mana the entire game. And his other land is a freaking gemstone mine with 1 counter on it.
Yeah, and what's credit to Tom, I obviously underestimate him because the reason why I made that play is because I make that play all the time. Like Lantex players just make that play,
donkeys.
And they always I always tax.
Tom made a masterful play. So this game goes on for a long time. At some point, Tom duresses in a null, and the game keeps going. Tom keeps just playing lands out because I think he has to, right? And then Lanny draws a Gaia's Blessings, the annul. Is it annul, land tax, and Enlightened Tutor you put back in your deck?
It was like annul, land tax, and scroll rack. I was like trying to clean up for possible Haunting Echoes.
Yeah. So, the other thing is you were just sitting with you played a very early Tormod script in game 2, and the commentators are saying whatever. And I literally messaged Hoyp. I'm like, Laney's never going to use this Tormod script. Hoyp doesn't message me until later, and he's just like, and I'm just like, he played it so early. Do you really think he was targeting the rock? It just doesn't matter. He has Tormod script to play so that in case he gets Haunting Echoes, he can Tormod script himself and not lose the game, right? So anyway,
that's true up until the point where I had
a bunch of elephant tokens.
I had the play available to deny a Cabal Therapy with my Tormod script.
Who cares?
I mean, it could have been relevant if that Cabal Therapy was the only interaction. Okay, so we're jumping around turns here, but on this specific Tormod script turn, Tom plays a Phyrexian Rager. He's tapped out for the Rager. He still has his land drop. There's a Therapy in his graveyard, and he knows about a face-up Oath of Druids. So if I crypt him there, I can drop an Oath, and then Tom will be stranded with the creature against an Oath. All my Oath monsters completely win the game for me.
Unless he has a removal for the Oath.
Unless he has a removal for the Oath or removal for his own Rager. But instead, I just let it go. He flashes back the first Therapy, getting an Oath. He plays a second one from his hand. Like he goes Swamp there, second Therapy, gets my mana leak. And or no, he duressed a mana leak that game. Not important. Anyways, that was like a minor thing with Crypt. What's the really funny is the absolute truth, which is I drew my opening hand. I drew my card for the turn as Tormod's Crypt, and I was like, I'm pretty sure I normally sideboard this out in this matchup. And then I was like, I guess I might. It's actually good because of Haunting Echoes. I literally didn't plan to have it in against Haunting Echoes.
Well, I mean, it was a bit. So if you didn't plan to have it, like you would have left it in your hand for future score rack fodder. But you'd played it around turn 3.
Yeah. I played it.
Yeah, you obviously want to get it out in front of the Haunting Echoes. But anyway, so the point is, game 3, Tom's looked behind. Lanny casts this Guy's Blessing
and all. Yeah.
He has the full everything in play, right? So like Lanny at this point, probably in his head is like, because he also cast a direct.
Well,
right?
So the sequence was first on a random turn, I Guy's Blessing back in a null, land tax, like whatever. I have Scroll Rack, Ivory Tower, Mox Time, and Oath of Druids in play. And I draw a land tax like off, like in runner draws, I get delivered a duress, and then like 2 turns later I get a land tax. So I duress, clear the way, play the land tax. Tom's hand, I duressed away it's just a nothing. And Tom's hand is Baloth, lands, and Crows and Tusker.
So then Tom cycles Crows and Tusker, draws for his turn, and he just is in the tank for like a year, right? So I'm watching this live. I'm sure Laney's thinking the same thing. Just like if there had been a Pernicious Deed in those top 2 cards, he would have slammed it. But Tom is just not taking action for like 5 minutes. and Mike Arnold is making cracks about how these are untimed rounds. Anyway, what does he play first?
He plays Flashback Call of the Herd.
In order to do what?
Flashback Cabal Therapy.
Because he thought you might have drawn what?
A null.
A null. You did not. Then he plays Pernicious Deed and blows up Lanny 6 for 1.
Yeah, 7 for 1 if you count the extra land
6
for the
one.
Mox.
It's
Mox is 2. Mox is
counted the Enlightened Tutor is 6 for 1.
Oh, yeah.
They only counted it 5 for 1 on camera, but it was 6 for 1 if you count the Enlightened Tutor. Anyway,
do you count 2 for Mox though? You got to count 2 for Mox. 2 for Mox, 2 for whatever.
There's an Ivory Tower, right?
There's an Oath.
Yeah, so he gets absolutely wrecked. And like the game isn't over, right? Like Lanny could just presumably draw a Gaia's Blessing that will like get things going again. But and like just Tom is playing the rock, so it's not like he could even
he just floods out from there. He doesn't draw any action for like 100 turns. And so the problem is I don't have lands, and my Stone Rain myself comes around to bite me because I don't have basic forest. So I can't like play an Oath and try to like whittle down these 3 Pernicious Deeds that are in his hand. I can't.
Oh yeah, because by this point, you also like when you duressed him and he had like 2 or 3 Pernicious Deeds and a Naturalize, you took a Pernicious Deed, right?
Yeah, I
should have taken the Naturalize.
I know I should have taken the Naturalize. I mean, that was like just such a like I literally couldn't figure out like what my plan, like what I was doing. Basically, I just kind of I lost the plot, and it actually came up, which is just kind of
you
like,
lost the plot armor.
Yeah, I did. And actually, what actually came up was that the thing that I didn't understand was that I did put one vulnerability in Tom's Death Star Rock. And it was, he can't activate Pernicious Deed if he has elephant tokens on the table. So if I had just taken his Naturalize and he can only use deeds to clear my stuff, then he actually has to clear his stuff. But I took a deed, and anyways, I just like mismanaged like little bits of value. Like I just kind of like, I just couldn't.
Like, fine, you made a mistake on turn 2. A lot of stuff went on between turn 2 and it's like turn 17.
I needed that land though. Because I never triggered land tax. I just like didn't draw lands, and actually
it was hilarious.
Lands.
You never triggered land tax in game 2 or 3.
Yep, that's how you lose.
So anyway, happy ending. Good guys win, bad guys die. I know you think your deck is cool, and I don't. God forbid, I'm cheering for the Rock, but we can't. Maybe you should have won when people would realize how miserable land tax is. Don't worry, Rich Shea will give him a reminder before the PSS is over.
Yeah. Well, Rich Shea actually already caught a loss to Tom, but he'll have to remind everybody but Tom. I was like a little irked. I was like a little bit irked because people were just like, "Oh, well, the Rock has so much hate for Parfait." I'm like, hate in the form of like
1-for-1s.
Hate in the form of like cards that are useful in every matchup, and I'm like, okay, it's like now all of a sudden
they're not useful in
like,
every matchup, right? Like. I mean, we've talked about this. I against elves, I sat out all my discard, right?
Yeah.
Like, people don't understand sideboarding. It's like seriously poppycock. Like, who cares what anybody says? They're like, I think this is pretty good. Why? Because you lose more slowly, right? Well, I guess when you're playing the Rock, losing more slowly feels like winning, right?
I mean, that's basically the idea, right? Isn't that the whole point? I thought that's how you play Control.
No, dude.
Lose slowly.
So, like, Control is like. Do you ever see the movie The Fighter with Mark Wahlberg? Good movie.
Not you, not you, not you, and not you is the quote from The Fighter. Yeah, I've seen The Fighter with Mark Wahlberg.
Yeah, so you just take like
Christian Bale too.
Just take a lot of blows, man. You just take a lot of blows, and at some point, you give them a liver punch, and then that's it. That's Control. You just had to take a lot of blows, man.
Yeah, I mean, that's what the Rock does. That's the bread and butter of the Rock.
No, it does not. If you're like duressing Cabal Therapy your opponent's threats and destroying their creatures for removal, you don't actually take that many blows. And then you're just like getting your Baloth out and stuff. It's absorbing a lot of damage. You have no training to be a Control mage if the Rock is your training base.
Fair enough. So I guess
if you're a Wall of Roots idiot, you just like willfully choose not to block. Like that was like Hoyt once was telling me, he's just like, no. The key to this matchup is not blocking. And I'm like, brother, I don't even play your stupid walls. But if you're going to play the walls and not block, I just don't know what you're supposed to be doing then. Right? Like, who wouldn't absorb 5/6 of a ball lightning? Like, I would just absorb that. In the abstract.
I thought that was fundamentally the point of the card in the deck, but
I don't know, man.
But you gotta let people, put their own strategies together based on what they like to do. If we're not on the same wavelength to begin with, then we can't sort of suppose what's going on. So post land tax ban, and actually technically pre land tax ban, it seems that everybody wants to build effectively the same deck. Do you know that deck, Mike?
Is it red, white slide?
No.
Is it mono black control?
It's even worse. No, also no.
Black control.
It is none other than the Rock's hot step sibling, ugly step sibling, Junk Rock.
Junk Rock.
So Kyle Monson, who was on I Got Questions podcast, went ahead and gifted us with Junk Rock. He got second place. He lost to Elves in the finals in the monthly. With this
Elvish Aberration.
So he called it Deed Guy Ale. I just call these decks junk because they're junk. I don't want to talk too much about this deck because he covers it quite well on I Got Questions. I think that we will start with like your base comment, which is, so this is a black-white deck.
He's playing Taro's Faithful in a green deck? God bless.
Yeah, I mean, got to beat Burn somehow.
God bless.
Metelsky brought that tech out. We were testing Burn against his version of Dead Guy Ale.
Yeah, but he plays unplayable Dead Guy Ale, right?
Well, he plays playable Dead Guy Ale. That's what he calls it.
I think he's misspelled his deck. He's been trying to get every time I talk to him, he's like, "Oh no, play my Dead Guy Ale deck." It's actually one of the few decks I don't own.
Phyrexian Rager and Baron Moore and Secluded Step really giving some mileage there.
Dude, City of Brass X2, I can't live with this. All right, so talk to me about Kyle Munson's deck.
Kyle Munson's deck is basically Dead Guy Ale. So for the viewers at home, we have 4 Duress, 4 Gerard's Verdict, 3 Plague Spitter, 1 Undead Gladiator, 2 Graveborn Muse, 4 Exalted Angel, 4 Swords of Plowshares, a Edict of both kinds, Diabolic and Chainers, a Smother, 3 Vindicates, 4 Pernicious Deed, 1 Haunting Echoes, 1 Skeletal Scrying, 1 Elvish Aberration, a bunch of lands to produce junk mana. Sideboard, we have an additional Haunting Echoes, a Balrash Stronghold, a Dust Bowl, a Coffin Purge, Withered Wretch, Cabal Therapy, 2 Rays of Revelations, Disenchant, Crumble, Decree of Pain, 1 Gaia's Blessing for the mill matchup, and 3 Taro's Faithful. I think that this deck
I played a deck like this on the Pro Tour more than once, just so you know.
I mean,
to the point Raph Levy once said something to me along the lines of, "Do you always play black-white?"
Do you want to tell us why the Abzan colors black, white, and green is called junk?
Yeah, so Adrian Sullivan once tricked me into playing a deck in an extended Pro Tour called Pro Tour Junk. I named it. So a bunch of us played it. I was the only one to make day 2. I always like to point out that meant that like 8 idiots lost to me on day 1. And you really had to be a moron to lose to this deck, by the way. So there was a deck called Pro Tour Jank, right? So that was like a red-white based aggro deck. Red-white is properly the Richmond gun, but like Jank could be anything. Could be like Naya colors, could be Jeskai colors, but it's like base red-white. You're talking about like Sukata Lancers, Savannah Lions, that kind of stuff. So Adrian makes this deck. It's green, black, white, and so Junk sounds kind of like Jank, and it's also like a 3-color creature deck to be played and extended. So I named it Pro Tour Junk. The original version we played Hunted Wumpus, which is a 6/6 for 4 that has among the worst 187 abilities ever. God, I can't believe. I mean, the number of Spirit of the Night and Morphlings that I put into play in that Pro Tour for my opponent is embarrassing. And again, I beat 8 idiots on day one. Okay, like, so, yeah, it was like, I beat Tricks. I beat the Donate Illusions deck, actually.
Yeah, they have nothing to put out for Wumpus.
No, I figured out to play, like, Ebony Charm. Is that the Adrian wanted to play Headstone, right? Because Headstone RFG's a card from the opponent's graveyard and then draw a card. I'm like, well, look, if we're playing this in a sideboard game, it's only in a sideboard game. We're never going to have Headstone in our main deck, right? He's like, yeah. So if we ever side it in, or you don't ever just, you know, do one of these Fran, you know, a 60th card that's a bad cycling card, we would never really do that, right? So if we ever have this, it's just better to have the 1 mana version than the 2 mana version. Forget about drawing a card. And so you just find that to be convincing. But Ebony Charm also has gain 2 life. So I beat Donate Illusions in round 2 by siding it in and gaining 2 life. Yeah, yeah, because I'm, you know, every part of the buffalo. So it's a green, black, white. The most famous play in the history of Pro Tour Junk is Gerard Fabiano, years later, played the deck. I don't know why you would play it. It was not good on the Pro Tour. And again, I made day 2, but it was embarrassing when I did it. So he's playing it like in a Grand Prix. He cast Demonic Consultation. And by the way, we had cards like Demonic Consultation, and we were using them to get a 6/6 for 4 that had a bad 187 ability. Gerard Fabiano casts.
You were consulting for Wumpus in this deck?
In this story, Gerard Fabiano consulted for Humpus, Curse Scroll. He couldn't remember the name of Hunted Wumpus. What did I consult for? I usually consulted for land. I think we had Tithe in that deck. We had Mox Diamond. It was like one of these freaking Lanny specials that your opening hand would make no sense unless you were like I just like looked at my hand. I'm like, it's just some Moxes. Okay, Tithe. Like, what the hell does this hand do?
So what you're telling me is that these junk deck needs the little Mox Diamonds.
We played Mox Diamond in the original version, which is one of the reasons I know I own Mox Diamond, because I played them on the Pro Tour.
Oh, man, we got to find those, though.
Yeah, man.
Shout out to Michael J's parents in Cleveland. It's time to dog through those boxes, make a little trip.
So, yeah, what did I consult for? I think I consulted for Hunted Wumpus in a feature match that Scott Johns covered. I had this masterful play where I think we had Honorable Passage. We had a lot of good bullets because, like, it's different than when you have Demonic Consultation in your deck. You can play like high leverage instants and they get really interesting, you know? Versus like, I'm very against playing cards like Deflecting Palm or whatever in contemporary modern today.
Right, because you have to play multiple copies.
And you're just, you know, your mana is tapped on the main phase, and it's not up to you, right? Like, so a lot of times, well, just play around it. You just can't. Your cards don't line up that way that much. But like, if you're playing with Demonic Consultation, you could just have like a 1 or 2 bullet instance in your sideboard and annihilate people. I remember I had an opponent who, like, he used a Fire Blast and more to try to get rid of my Humpus Wumpus. And I got an Honorable Passage, and that was that. That locked my day too.
Your wanted Humpus.
Yeah, so anyway, that's why it's called Pro Tour Junk. I do like the tech here of 1 Elvish Aberration and 4 Windswept Teeth to get a Forest. The problem is that the Forest is utterly terrible in this deck. The tech is awesome, but the Forest is bad. So this deck is actually pretty close to being great.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot to like
green
here.
Is pretty bad.
Yeah, I think well, we'll talk about that a little bit when we get to Francisco's deck. But yeah, black, white, splash, and green for Pernicious Deed. One of the things that I love about black, white is that you get to play Vindicate. So Vindicate and destroy any kind of permanent, right?
Yeah, I'm not really that into Pillage/Stone Rain. We're talking about pre-modern. Like three mana 1/1. You know, you could do that for. You were casting Innocent Blood. You understand that they have the same text oftentimes. The Innocent Blood is just better.
Right. I mean, the whole point is that Vindicate is a card that allows you to not run main deck disenchants. Like, so one of the fundamental.
If the enemy is a 12/12 for 1 that has 8+ free counter spells, 3 casting cost sorcery speed removal is not doing anybody any favors. Let's get to 2023 pre-modern.
Well, let me go on like one of the fundamental laws of pre-modern, which is you cannot draw more than 1 card a turn in pre-modern. This is especially true now that land tax is banned. The remaining way,
like Phyrexian whatever.
the remaining way to draw greater than one card a turn, Phyrexian Arena like just doesn't even count because it comes down on turn 3, and then by turn 5, it will have done the same amount of work as a Gush, which costs no mana, right? So, but there's only a couple ways to break that paradigm. And I'll just kind of run it down. So one of the ways to break that paradigm is to play Survival of the Fittest. One of the only cards that lets you draw multiple cards a turn. You're exchanging your mana for cards, though. So you need a lot of mana. Survival of the Fittest, effectively only functional in the Elves deck. Obviously, Hermit Feb, other survival decks, like whatever. But, if we're talking tier 1, Survival Elves is the only survival deck. Only deck that draws.
Wait, what is the definition of tier 1 to you, right? So I know what tier 1 means.
It's just Elves, Dreadnought, Goblins, Burn, Landstill, and I was about to say Parfait, but am I missing one? It's just those decks.
Well, I mean, so
the Rock
is just based on popularity, right? So,
I don't want to.
They're not based on how good the deck is.
I mean, it's like I don't want to have an argument.
Replenish has got to be tier 1.
I don't want to make it
based on how many people are playing.
I don't want to get into an argument over like the definition of tiers. Sure, let's just go with popularity.
Y'all old school people in pre-modern use the word tier all the time.
Everyone
always saying tier.
Everyone who plays Magic uses tier.
I never say tier. But part of the reason is I know what the tiers mean, and nobody else seems to.
Yeah,
it's like metagame. People use metagame when they mean environment.
Mike, we have a shared language. You can't go off into a corner and then invent your own and expect everybody to expect everything. But this is neither here nor there. My point is,
you spell all right, ALRIGHT.
Mike,
E in the word.
You brought this up because I said that Elves was the only tier or good deck that runs Survival of the Fittest, and that's just true. Elves is better than every survival deck by an order of magnitude. So whatever you call it,
deck, bro.
It's not better than Elves. Like Elves is an order of magnitude better than Feb. Like that's just true. Like it's Elves. Come on, Mike, you've played Elves. It's insane.
I did. I own $1,000.
Yeah,
to play Elves.
Deck.
It was really easy.
Deck is insane. We're talking about a paradigm of drawing multiple cards a turn. It's a paradigm that I really love. It's something I really love about pre-modern because you get cards for free in contemporary Magic. You don't get cards for free in pre-modern. So that's one paradigm. The one way to break the paradigm of drawing more than one card a turn. The other way to break this paradigm is to only run 16 or 17 lands in your deck and get a little help from the card Gush, right? So if you're only going to draw one card per turn, never drawing a land when you don't want to is really good. This is a concept we know as Xerox, right? So we've often had this discussion where like, oh, land still draws all these cards and like whatever, and it's just crushing card advantage. And when I joined pre-modern, was under the impression that the way that land still worked was very similar to contemporary blue-white control. Where I'm like, okay, well, if they have 7 cards in hand, surely they cannot lose. And dear listener, I cannot tell you how many times I've seen Landstill players lose with 7 cards in their hand.
I wrote an article recently about how when they're sitting behind their invincible 2-mana enchantment that they lose the game more than half the time.
Yeah.
Like they just don't understand how to win the game. Like I'll win eventually. No, you're actually going to deck eventually.
Yeah, you're going to you'll die eventually. I found that to be an interesting thing. And once I kind of and now I just kind of yell at everybody who plays Landstill. I'm just like, oh yeah, cast your Fact or Fiction. You're going to draw mostly air. And one of the key reasons for that is because Blue-Eye Landstill runs cards like Disenchant main deck. It has to run cards like Disenchant main deck. It has to run a lot of lands and has to run like a lot of somewhat narrow answer spells. And it kind of bridges this gap by playing counter spells, which of course can answer anything. So counter spell is a much more efficient Vindicate in nearly all scenarios.
You've just never liked Landstill enough, but I'll forgive it.
Well, I feel like my core criticism of the deck having like pretty high curve and like the possibility of just kind of bottoming out by like drawing way too much air is like definitely one of the things.
It has a lower effective curve than Replenish, which you like. Replenish is all 4s.
Right, but
it still has like 4 total force.
Landstill is
deck.
Landstill is like a control deck with a high curve, and Replenish is a combo deck with a high curve and like lots of ramp. And then for what it's worth, casting Replenish gets you 16 mana of value. So it's a good deal.
I mean, it's all contextual, man, right? Like that's only true if they don't duress your key card.
Yeah,
right?
but
like Landstill not only can defend itself,
but you can't compare apples to apples. The curve of Replenish versus the curve of Landstill, because fundamentally
Landstill takes more actions.
Yeah, but like Replenish has won the game after it's spent 7 mana. Landstill typically wins the game after spending 100 mana.
Yeah, but it's so fun.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not going to argue with you on that.
The joy of playing Landstill is high. All right, so keep going with your paradigms of pre-modern.
Okay, so connected to this is that if you're playing a deck that does not have access to blue mana, does not have access to Survival of Finish, it does not have access to Gush, you're playing the Rock, right?
We're already going down the wrong road here.
And
if you don't have blue and you don't have survival, but wait, tell me more, Lanny. What can I maybe do?
The final choice is, of course, to draw more than one card a turn is to murder your opponent, which is a good way to murder your opponent with your first 7 cards, which
red deck, goblins.
Yeah. I mean, Goblins obviously has Ringleader, but effectively Goblins draws 1 card a turn. But the important part is that your first 7 are effective at murdering your opponent. But if you're playing,
you should write like a downloadable PDF. Like these are the 3 immutable pillars of pre-modern.
Oh, I'm distilling
Lanny, Sable Genius, moxdiamond.com.
We're distilling this concept, as we speak. So finally, the reason why I love cards like Vindicate is because Vindicate allows you to play fewer cards that don't do anything in game 1. I don't think Vindicate is a great card, but I think a Disenchant with no targets in game 1 is worse. Pay no mind to the fact that this junk list has 4 Swords to Plowshares and then 2 Edicts and a Smother and Deeds and Plague Spitters, just in case your opponent thought that they were going to have creatures on the board. So I think we're a little over-indexed on creatures.
But I mean, who is guilty of having Disenchants and Swords to Plowshares in their main deck? Who's guilty of that? Rifter? Landstill? Who else? Star Spangled Slaughter?
Yeah, I think Star Spangled Slaughter is actually a pretty good example because, for example, in Kowal's list, he was like, I don't play cantrips. All my cards are super solid, but he also has like a couple disenchants. I'm just kind of like, well,
I think both Rifter and Kowal's version of Star Spangled Slaughter, but like not Mike Arnold's version, they just overdraw, right? So like Rifter doesn't ever get bothered by having, like, if you have like stray Swords to Plowshares, it just doesn't matter. You just like draw more cards. Who cares?
Well, Swords to Plowshares is like the one extremely big exception to this rule because Swords to Plowshares allows you to compete with the I'm going to murder you with my opening hand decks. But
in the absence ever really stuck with spare like disenchants, right? Like, so I don't even play disenchant in Landstill. I play seal. You just play the seal, right? There's always something to kill, right? Like you can kill a Mishra's Factory. I guess this deck doesn't have a lot of targets for disenchant. I mean, you could
it's bad
trade
against
with the Deed.
It's not great against Pernicious Deed, but Pernicious Deed is not great against Landstill. I don't want to belabor this. Like, I don't want to try to go to like too small a picture on this. Like, the point is, if you draw Disenchant and you're playing a deck that doesn't have good card draw, right? Doesn't have good card advantage. Like, that blank hurts you way more than a deck that can essentially ignore the downside of having narrow cards in their
I see what you're saying. Like, if you're playing Solution, for example, right? And you're just like, guys, land.
Yeah.
Some of your guys have a big text box.
Yep.
Like, wait, this looks like a guy, but among its abilities is the ability to tap and protect other guys from removal. Or you could just say a word. Just say it. Crumble. Skeletal Scrying. Whatever word you say, they can't do that thing now. Right, so you're just playing Solution. I guess if Solution has like a handful of Swords to Plowshares and Disenchant, they're not going anywhere.
Yeah.
Right? They're just in hand.
Exactly. So these are decks that get sort of somewhat low average like leverage over their opening 7, somewhat low average leverage over their cards. Like, this deck has 4 Exalted Angels. So if your hand is like Exalted Angels in interaction, and they're like, plow your Exalted Angel, and you're like sitting there and you have like, whatever, your own disenchants and plows, they have no targets for that. You're just going to be really like hard up on utilizing your cards. It's just like the opposite of the paradigm, or it's like it's tied into the paradigm of like, okay, well, a 24 land deck is going to lose to a 17 land deck because the 17 land deck won't flood out in the late game. Obviously, you build your 24 land decks to kind of counteract this and try to make land drops every turn and try to convert those land drops into leverage on the game. But fundamentally, the reason why Xerox works is because late in the game, you stop drawing lands when you need to stop drawing lands, while your opponent is drawing too many lands.
Spell per spell with the exchanges, right? A lot of 17 land decks have a bunch of like terrible one casting cost cards in the late game versus the 24 land deck is just cycling Decree of Justice or something.
Right. I mean, again, I think that land still breaks this paradigm because land still kind of can draw multiple cards a turn, and then it needs to be met in value, value in addition to density, because like, this is a deck that has like, that has like high density because it doesn't run disenchant. But it has kind of like low value because like none of its cards are particularly powerful. Like, don't get me wrong, Graveborn Muse is pretty sweet, but just comparing it to what other people are doing is very different. So like the example that I actually like to use is, and I'll give away a little bit of tech here. My Grotog deck is not that good against Dead Guy Ale on the Rock, but I have a decent enough, like I probably scratched 50% or over in the matchup, because I actually do quite often find myself in situations where they're drawing dead. Like I have, Meddling Mage on Pernicious Deed, and they are just drawing lands when they need spells. And like the most important spells from them are Source of Plowshares, or, if it's Dead Guile, it's Source of Plowshares, and if it's the Rock, it's Deed. But
now you don't know what's a Meddling Mage because they have both Swords of Plowshares and Deed.
Oh yeah, this deck looks like it crushes Grotog.
It's a prisoner's dilemma,
because it can remove my Meddling Mage with a Vindicate, Diabolic Edict, Chainer's Edict, Swords of Plowshares, a Plague Spitter block, or
like this is one of the decks why
Pernicious Deed.
I always thought that Meddling Mage was overrated. I mean, I know Sam likes it too, but like Fran has just always been like, Meddling Mage is the best creature. It's obviously very good in Fran's deck, but like this is like my prime example of why I just never respected Meddling Mage that much. This is the kind of deck I was just like used to playing for years. Or like, what are you even gonna name, right? Like I can kill your Meddling Mage. It's like just a guy. It's just that, but the thing is, when Meddling Mage is bad, he's worse than a guy because he's just like a 2/2 for 2 is like not good enough to be a card. And so it's like, I'm going to name some card that's in your deck, right? But if it doesn't interact with anything because you have too great of a diversity of things to name, then it's just worse than a card.
Yeah, it's a punish. It's a punish on combo players that lean too much on one card, and a punish on mid-range or control players who lean too much on Source of Plowshares. But like my point was, if my Grotog deck gets into the late game and they start flooding out, that's when I can tend to capitalize, because then I only need to counter one card per turn, like on a couple key turns, because they're going to go land, meaningful card, land, meaningful card. And, I have enough counter spells to cover me until they have 0 life. So I think it strongly benefits a deck like this to have a card like Vindicate. However, it does mean to me that you don't need to play 2 Edicts and a Smother because you have Vindicates and Deeds and Plague Spitters. Like, it's very over-indexed on creatures. But, Kyle Monson saw a lot of success, somehow lost to Elves anyways in the final. I may have that wrong, but
this actually makes sense to me that he would lose to Elves. Actually, you want to look at the deck? Sex doesn't seem good to me against Elves.
I mean, I don't know. That's Plague Spitter.
So
I don't have much more to add besides like the deck has like boards into double Ray of Revelation disenchant for the survival. It has I guess there's no engineered plagues in the mix, but like Plague Spitter is an engineered plague in the main deck.
If he had plague, it'd be one thing. No, but Plague Spitter is only on your own upkeep. So like if you just wait, right? You just take one turn where you just put all the machinery in play, you just kill them. Yeah. Like that's super easy.
Well, I mean, I would assume that you can suppress.
Even if they have Ray of Revelation, you just You just go about your business if you have 2 creatures in your hand. Right? It's just
yeah. I mean, don't get me wrong. Like I think
no, it just doesn't do anything. That's what I'm saying. Like it just doesn't do anything.
Well,
like if you play the right game plan.
Well, I mean, I would assume that the Plague Spitter seat is like essentially trying to navigate to a spot where they can suppress Survival of the Fittest and land Plague Spitter on a turn that, you know, it gets some value, much like you try to time your Engineered Plague. I mean, I agree that Engineered Plague
but it's different. Effective. You play your Engineered Plague and always get money, right? That's part of it. Plague Spitter is a 7-turn clock. Okay, first of all, it's not fast. Right, so you can just get to like turn 5 or 6 of the Plague Spitter cycle, and then, you know, if you have like a bunch of lands in play, you can just cast your Survival and kill them that turn. That's what I'm saying. You just literally just kill them that turn. And what do they have to say about it? Right, the Plague Spitter can't kill elves on demand. It's not how it does it.
Yeah, I mean, I agree, but
it's unlike stacking Engineered Plagues, you can't. Like a single Plague Spitter doesn't even beat an Elvish champion.
Yeah, I mean, I would assume that this deck has, you know, anyways, I don't want to get too into it. Like on paper, the deck with unlimited removal feels like it should win. It didn't win. I didn't watch the playback. I started watching and it was just like a bad time and whatnot. But anyways, everyone is pretty excited about Monson's brew. I think it's pretty cool. Moving on, we have Francisco's junk.
Wait, I want to talk about a deck a little bit more.
Oh, okay.
So I actually think this deck has some potential. I think it is less offensive to me than Fran's deck. Because first of all, like the structure of this deck is weird. Like the best card in this deck is Undead Gladiator. He only has 1 copy. So
I think you're the only person who has that analysis.
Undead Gladiator is the best. It lets you cycle away your garbage. This deck is like mad garbage, Lanny. Like just terrible cards that you don't want to have in your hand a lot of the time in certain particular matchups, right? Like what is your biggest objection?
Mike, is the deck garbage or is the deck junk?
Well, it's junk. It's junk, but like there's just like a lot of matchups where like, all right, I just don't want a Chainer's Edict in my hand, right? It's just terrible.
Yeah, so I actually think that's really sick, right? Because then you can actually play stuff like Ray of Revelation main deck and then just pitch to your Undead Gladiators. Yeah, so maybe we run 3 of them instead of Graveborn Muse.
So I used to play 4 Undead Gladiators, I think, at some point in my life. But Undead Gladiator Skeletal Scrying is just the best combo on Earth. So good, right? Yeah. So that's really cool. I mean, there's just a bunch of strategies that could just never beat you if you had enough Undead Gladiators. Like Psychotog is a really good example of a deck that could never beat this deck. Right, like you just create a wall of removal, and you just like bitch all of your like Graveborn Muses and Exalted Angels, so that your entire game plan is Duresses, point removal, and a Haunting Echoes that is going to resolve. Right, like that's how you should play certain matchups.
Yeah, I mean, my Psychotog deck certainly isn't going to beat this for sure.
No Psychotog deck.
Well, right, a Psychotog deck with upheaval.
No, because you can just resource deny them with Duress and Gerard's Verdict, and Upheaval one is actually strangely vulnerable to Vindicate. True. But like that is contingent on having more Undead Gladiators and probably fewer Plague Spitters, because I don't think this deck beats elves in its current configuration anyway. But the reason I find this to be not that good is because like Pernicious Deed. So the 1 forest is super cute, and I do kind of like the 1 forest Elvish Aberration combo because they have Gaia's Blessing and Ray of Revelation to the sideboard. Those are all really cute. I appreciate that. That's cool. The thing that I don't like about it is Pernicious Deed just isn't that good in this deck. Like you could just play a Chroma's Vengeance, and like I think a Chroma's Vengeance is just hyper underplayed in pre-modern if you're willing to accept that Pernicious Deed is a card. It's like less mana than Pernicious Deed most of the time. Like 6 mana, like, you know, if you're doing like a deed for 5, that's 8 total mana, you know? And what you can do instead is just like make your mana better for casting a Chroma's Vengeance. And it cycles. It's gassed. You just get it out of your hand and matchups that it's not good.
I mean, I'm interested in following that line. I think the one obvious counterpoint to that is just that you would just get like Wasteland ported out of like your Chroma's Vengeance range in many matchups where you want to be faster.
Maybe like there's like in the PSS last year, I had Slice and Dice and not Wrath of God, right? So I did get Mana Denied by Caffeinated 22. That was like just a terrible man. Like, if I had known that was coming, I would have just played like the Light of Day in my sideboard that I eventually ended up playing, and I would have had better tools there. But nobody's saying to not play Wrath in your white-black control deck, right? Like, but Akroma's Vengeance takes the spot of Pernicious Deed, not of Wrath, right? They're different. But there's no Wrath in this deck. Now, if we go to Francisco's deck, which you wanted to do a second ago.
Yeah, so let's just take a second. So what are you pitching here? We're saying take out the green, take out the deeds and the fancy stuff.
I mean, I would not play Vindicate. I don't think it's a good card. I would not play Plague Spitter. I don't think it's a good card. I would not play Graveborn Muse. I think that's an actively bad card.
So we're just gonna play Dead Guy Ale. What do we think about Gerard?
Dead Guy Ale.
We just call it
black white mid range.
We call every black white deck in pre-modern Dead Guy Ale. So it's just like,
so like the cards that I like are Duress, Gerard's Verdict, Undead Gladiator, possibly Exalted Angel. I feel like if you're gonna play Exalted Angel, you should play like 2 copies of Astral Slide. Also, like Astral Slide Taros Faithful is kind of the tits.
Astral Slide, Taros Faithful, Undead Gladiator. So we're playing black white Slide, but only 2 copies of Slide, which are going to get like swept up by our Chrome's Vengeances.
It's fine.
Point. Yeah, it's fine.
Right, it's not a big deal. Right, you play Astral. First of all, Astral Slide, if it sticks, it's like the all-time best card you could ever have against 12.
It's pretty sweet because we can also play like 28 lands thanks to playing eight cycling lands.
Yes,
so
you
awesome.
Absolutely could do that, and you don't play City of Brass. Like City of Brass is the worst card. Most decks should not play it, right? Like, so there's 2 kinds of decks, but there's more than 2 kinds of decks that play City of Brass, oddly enough, right? There are decks where City of Brass is acceptable. An example of those decks would be Cadaverous Blue, which wins on turn 3, or, Hermit Feb, which wins on turn 2, or, 12-12 Hermit, which wins on turn 2. Those decks, it is acceptable to play City of Brass. Now, there are other decks that it is not acceptable to play City of Brass, and that's all the other decks, right? So if you are not one of the decks that wins on turn 2 or 3, you can play 1 City of Brass. That is the rule. You can play 1 City of Brass.
Well, Robin Lund will be happy to hear that, because
then you will not draw it very often, and it will not damage you that much. City of Brass is really bad, okay? Now you have all these people playing the Rock because they think that they have a viable matchup with Mono Red, I guess because they don't block with their Walla Roots, and they have like 2 City of Brass.
Okay, let's cool it with the Hoyp slander, okay?
It's
if either podcast host ever wants to get invited back to the PSS, I think we got to stay on Hoyp's good side. Hoyp, your Rock deck.
One of us is salty for not getting invited back. How about that, Lanny? All right. So anyway, what I'm going to say about City of Brass is this: like, it's such a massive liability in a format where you have decks like Draco Blast that can deal 16 but can't get the last 4 necessarily. You gave them 4. Come on, brother. Right? Or like, it's so bad against Mono Red. It literally cuts off the spells you can cast instead of allowing you to cast those spells. Now, there is this theory called the false tempo archetype, right? Where you could play cards like, if you're playing like 3/3s for 1 and a lot of like Fleece Mane Lions, City of Brass makes your deck fast enough that you can just get in there and theoretically race people who aren't Mono Red, or maybe even Mono Red because your creatures are bigger. But that's like, nobody's playing those decks in pre-modern. Like, I guess Hoyt played one last month, but his guys weren't even that big, right? Like, they were like 2 2s or 2 1s for 1. But you need to be in the 3/3 for 1 range to be playing City of Brass like that. And like, the tools just aren't in the format. The card is very bad. And I just don't know how to explain this more other than the 28 years I have of playing competitive Magic. Like, your life total is the most underused and arguably most important resource, and you can't just piss it away.
Well,
who will punish you for that?
I think that
your life total itself is a time walk. Think about it like that. Right?
I mean, I agree with that. I think that fundamentally you do have to break the paradigm of City of Brass. I think that the idea here, like the argument that this individual, this deck designer is making, is that they'll catch enough value off of splashing green in their deck that the timely Pernicious Deed will conserve more life points than the one you can't cast thanks to no green mana. Like, obviously, that's very debatable. And yeah, generally, City of Brass sucks, but pre-modern people want to play their cards and they want to play their cards on time. So City of Brass just ends up in a lot of places where it will lose you a lot of games, but you will at least be casting Vindicate while you do it.
Yeah, like it doesn't. I just don't think it wins you very many. I mean, outside of
you're saying it's
like
below
kind of the
replacement.
Hermit Feb people, it wins them games for sure, right? But it just doesn't win. Like,
the absolute best thing you can do with the City of Brass is discard it to Mox Diamond. But the fact that it's in your deck is a hedge for when you don't draw incredible card Mox Diamond.
So I agree that any way that you can destroy your own City of Brass, discard your own City of Brass, however, you don't tap your City of Brass.
I'm gonna harrow my City of Brass.
I mean, now you're harrowing. I mean, like, the people who have Harrow in their deck, in their green deck, but not Nature's Lore, I just find them, they're just so cute.
Well, they want to play, they want to play
Care Bears.
They want to play colors. They want to play colors other than green, Mike.
I mean, I don't know what to tell you. Like, Nature's Lore is a really good card. Harrow is a really, really low power card for pre-modern. Like, I have harrowed more than most of the people who are harrowing now. I have harrowed in my life, just so you know. It is not a high-powered card.
I mean, I don't think it's a high-power card. I think it's a high-power. It's an enabler for a high-powered strategy if you can put one together.
Not really.
If you can put it together. I mean, you don't want to get your Harrow dazed. That's pretty much just like the reason why you don't play.
I was literally not even there. I was just like, if we're spending 3 mana to cycle, like,
you spend 1 mana. You spend 1 mana. I
mean, yeah, I didn't even think about getting it dazed. I can't get my Chroma's Vengeance dazed if I'm cycling with it, just so you know. That's not a thing.
Harrow ramps. I mean, you can't just like make these arguments based on stuff that's aren't truth. Like, Harrow is +1 mana and it's -1 the turn you cast it. So it's actually quite good on balance. The problem is the text reads as an additional cost to cast Harrow and not a part of its resolution.
If we were playing block constructed, it'd be one thing, but there's a lot of blocks in pre-modern. Some of them include 12/12s for 1, right? Some of them include the Urza's block.
Yeah.
Right? Well, you can't just... I mean, you can do whatever you want.
Yeah, you got to let people have their fun.
But it's not good. Like, people don't really use Harrow to ramp. They use Harrow to fix, to be fair.
Well, it's both. I mean, because you can...
But that's not why it's there, right? They use Harrow to fix, not to ramp.
Yeah, but turn 3 Harrow into turn 4 Pernicious Deed for 2 is like a completely viable line. Turn 3 Harrow into Impulse is also just fine. Like, this is all stuff that's like
what's your combined record in all the events you've ever played where you were trying to Harrow into Impulse? I would just like to know, you, an above average by far pre-modern player.
It's probably 50%. It's still better than the Rock. It's still probably 50%.
It's fine. It's still better.
So
love it.
So we're building black white. We're splashing in a slide. We're running 4 Undead Gladiators. We're running 4 Baron Moor, 4 Secluded Step. Our mana is going to be awesome. Let's get some Friction and Rages in there. We got Taros Faithful coming out of the sideboard. Those are gas.
That's cool, right? With the slide.
Yeah. Let's see what other kind of action can we get here. So we're gonna cut all the Vindicates because we hate Vindicate, but now we can run Clear.
I mean, let's not get crazy.
Okay.
How about at a minimum we're playing Eternal Dragon?
Okay. Well, Eternal Dragon was always going to be in there. It kind of feels like that's like a guaranteed. Eternal Dragon is going to be a good segue into. Okay, let's go ahead.
Are we missing by like not? Doesn't this deck have Decree of Pain? How does this deck have 1 Decree of Pain in the sideboard but no Decree of Justice in the main deck?
I mean, turn 6 Elvish Aberration, turn 7 Decree of Justice for 7 tokens.
Okay, the biggest problem
tapping by Elvish Aberration.
All these decks have a problem in that they're just going to get absolutely demolished by Jeff Ferris. Right. So Jeff Harris has 100% win rate against all these decks.
Jeff Harris, noted New York City local who only plays Threshgeddon. I mean, he plays Goblin sometimes, but he's on the Threshgeddon train right now.
But 100% win rate against these. You could never beat Jeff Harris.
What if
he has like 7 Cataclysm and Armageddon after sideboarding? You can't beat him.
What if you... I don't know. I don't have a plan for Jeff. You got to lose some. Maybe
you'll just lose 100% of your matches.
No, I'm saying,
Harris.
yeah, I'm saying you got to lose
100%.
some. You got to lose some of your matchups, right?
But so don't even try to beat him, because that's what I would say. Because like, how could you beat 7 Cataclysm and Armageddon? You can't. Your deck only functions if you have 7 lands. That is not.
You board it into Oath for monsters.
Jeff Harris can't disenchant an Oath now.
Well, he won't disenchant an Oath if he doesn't see it coming, because you have no disenchant targets in the first game.
Okay, so are we not going to have a game 3? Have a game 3, even if you got him game 2 somehow.
I don't know.
Also,
can we just sideboard into a beatdown deck?
I mean, no. To be honest with you, no.
Can't we just like attack with our undead gladiator? It trades with the nimble mongoose.
I mean, ish.
All right.
Trades with also an unthreshed nimble mongoose.
All right. So speaking of Eternal Dragon and Decree of Justice, I think we should move on to Fran's deck.
So this deck is just a green-white deck.
Splashing Pernicious Deed.
Yeah, it's got like Treetop Village.
All right. For the listeners at home, we have 20 lands, 2 brush lands, 4 forests.
No, there's way more than 20 lands. There's lands in the second pile.
Oh, yeah. Okay. 27 lands. Yeah, Jesus. What was it? 27 lands, 2 brush lands, 4 forests, 1 land in War Waste, some plains, 2 swamps, 4 Treetop Village, 3 Dust Bowl, 4 Windswept Heath. We've got the new craze. Everybody's doing it. New York's hottest club is Main Deck Phyrexian Furnace, X2. 4 Swords to Plowshares, 4 Rampant Growth, 1 Naturalize, 2 Guy's Blessings, 1 Disenchant, 4 Pernicious Deed, 1 Harrow, 3 Wrath of God, 2 Ravenous Baloth, 3 Crows and Tusker, 4 Decree of Justice, and 2 Eternal Dragons. Sideboard is some sideboard cards, Plagues, Rays, Cop Red, Sphere of Resistance, which we've been excited about trying out, some Tormod's Crypts, Naturalized Crumble, and 2 Exalted Angels.
I don't like Sphere of Resistance. I think it's kind of bad. I think it's actually very bad, not kind of bad. But the thing that I like about Fran's deck more than the other junk deck, more junky junk deck, was like the black is a splash in the green-white deck is worse because this is an even more natural Chroma's Vengeance deck, but it's better because at least he's got sideboard engineered plagues, which actually gives you a reason to play black. Like, if you're not going to play plague, I just don't know what you're about in life.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think that fundamentally you're just going to disagree with white decks that splash for a deed because you believe so much in Chroma's Vengeance. But I think that there's a lot to be said that you can deed your opponent on turn 4. Whereas the best that this deck can do is Chroma's Vengeance your opponent on turn 5. So these are kind of crucial breakpoints. And then the other, I mean, what I didn't
even realize Fran's deck is literally just like Rampant Growth. He's just a better deed deck.
It is a better deed deck, but I want to get into
like with a Chroma's Vengeance, it's just a better deed deck.
Well, yeah. I mean, what I want to get into, I think that's like kind of at least kind of important is that like just running out a deed on 3 is like an extremely good play because you just gain so much tempo from time walking your opponent the following turn. Like, I mean,
kind of like really, who's scared of a tap out for deed on turn 3? That doesn't like if you're a parfait maniac, yeah, like if you didn't have a good answer, you're gonna lose some permanents, right? We watched you lose a lot of permanents to Pernicious Deed this week. I feel like maybe you have post-traumatic stress.
No. As somebody who's played a fair share of the Rock, like my number one tactic with the Rock was just play Deed and then pass the turn and take like 18 damage and then Deed my opponent and then turn the corner from there. Because if your opponent like my favorite play pattern with Deed is that your opponent, like you play a Deed and your opponent just sits there and it's like, well, I can't play more permanents, but I also can't like force this Deed activation. So they're always priced into getting 2 for 1 by Deed, trying to find a way to win with like the fewest permanents in play possible. you know,
Deed is good against manlands. I'll give it that.
Yeah, I mean, it just puts you in such a good position to just like turn the board around like on a turn cycle, right? So it's like you can sandbag your deed activation, untap, call the herd, flashback, call the herd, and all of a sudden your opponent has 0 turns. I'm not trying to argue that
Pernicious Deed isn't a good card, Lanny. That's not what I'm saying. I'm just saying white decks that just don't make any sense. They could be playing like Chroma's Vengeance is just a seamless card for them to play.
But a great disadvantage of Chroma's Vengeance and Wrath of God has always been you tap out for your Wrath of God, your opponent is like, okay, Goblin Ringleader. Indeed actually gives you the ability to...
Are you arguing that this deck is good against Goblin Ringleader?
I'm saying that Pernicious Deed is better against Goblin Ringleader than a Chroma's Vengeance.
It's not even good against Goblin Ringleader. You need 7 mana to stop a Goblin Ringleader with Deed. It's a freaking 2/2.
Yeah, but you can split it. You can split it between 2 turns. And again, the whole point is that you get the tempo. Like you steal the tempo back when you get to do something on their end step. It's just like Nivinral's Disc, right? Like it's actually super great if you're like clearing the board and then you start putting stuff on the table while your opponent has an empty board. Like we've all been there. We've all cast Wrath of God and our opponent's like, okay, I'll play three more creatures. What you got?
Yes. So we've all been there. I'm just saying it's just flabbergasting to me because this deck looks awful against goblins. It's like, well, this is much better against Goblin Ringleader than a Chroma's Vengeance. I'm like, okay, maybe that's true. I'm not even sure that it's true because you can't cast it 100% of the time. Right? You're just like always assume that you have like 3rd turn Deed access in a deck that has 1 swamp or 1 forest. Right? Like
yeah. I mean, it's like, got...
You have like... You can cast Deed at some point before the game is over. It doesn't mean you can cast it on 3rd turn.
7 black sources. It has Land Waste, 2 swamps, and 4 rampant growth. It's very low.
Yeah, that doesn't guarantee you turn 3 Deed.
No, I agree. 7 is quite low.
That's like a turn 8. So my point being, like, that it's just not even good there. Like you should be using your rampant growth to get at a faster Ravenous Ballot.
Well,
I don't know.
Luckily, we have 2, but I think your point.
Too.
I think your point is well taken. Fran is obviously going to keep tinkering with this deck. He loves it already. Pretty surprised there. But yeah, that and everybody's trying to figure out junk. Like I think a Swords to Plowshares Pernicious Deed deck is very inviting to a lot of people. It sounds to you like you're just going to go Swords to Plowshares, just go straight to a Chroma's Vengeance, which I'd love to see it. I would love to have a Swords to Plowshares, black cards, blue cards deck.
An Esper control deck, as it were.
I mean, I've done it before, and I've had moderate success. But I think that there's just some parts that need to put in place. Maybe it's an Astral Slide deck. I don't know. But lots of interesting stuff in the wake of Parfait. Of course, these decks all get murdered by Armageddon, like you said, which maybe is a healthy balance for the format that you can't play an oppressive, multicolored control. I mean, this isn't neither of these decks are near Parfait in their operation.
They're not really oppressive. They're just have some removal.
Yeah, they're just mid-range decks. There's like literally just mid-range decks.
They're just like, I mean, they're rampy mid-range decks, right? Like these.
No, the other one's not rampy. The Monson's deck has no ramp.
Well, I think if you just go back to Monson's deck, I think he probably could beat the Rock, right? Like,
oh, he definitely beats the Rock because he has Exalted Angel X4.
Oh yeah, Exalted Angel is literally the best card against the Rock. But also, like Graveborn Muse is kind of hard for the Rock to beat, right? You can't smother it.
Yeah.
Right. If he has like anything else,
you can't Vendetta it either. It's pretty sweet.
That card's hard to kill, right? If you're the Rock, and then he can just come back with Skeletal Scrying. Like Exalted Angel Skeletal Scrying is pretty good.
Yeah.
Like some of his cards are good. It's just like Vindicate, Plague Spitter, Pernicious Deed are like. I think you're underrating Vindicate. I think Vindicate is really good. It is stone a card. I finished second in a like 400 person PTQ with Vindicate in my deck once. Notably, I did not finish first.
I mean, Vindicate was an all-star. Like, one of the big reasons why a lot of my Esper control decks never lost to Parfait was because I had access to Vindicate in the main deck. And I just like had 4 Vindicate main decks so they could just like never put their shit together. So.
What Esper control decks are you talking
I mean, I guess
Are these like the whole wing of decks that you played before we became friends?
I brought it to a Tau meetup back in the day, and I might have deleted it. Yeah, so this is my draft for.
I'm still looking at Monson's.
I know. I don't know where my window went. Like it's just freaking.
Is that a reanimator deck?
No. I don't know why. My stuff just imploded. And like.
Oh, don't worry. Just describe the deck to me.
Basically, Gush, Mox Diamond, gluing together the mana base, with Psychotog, Exalted Angel Finisher, and then just 4 Swords of Plowshares, 4 Vindicate, Gushes, and Factor Fictions, just kind of like one for oneing your opponent and drawing a lot of cards and like trying to Mox Diamond your way out of all your problems. And maybe a couple Wrath of Gods. It was just like all the like land still control tools. None of the land still card advantage, except for like replacing standstill with Gush. And then having Mox Diamond glue everything together, and then post board like maybe having access direct. It was just like blue-white control deck, splashing black for Vindicate and Psychotalk.
Wow, one of those splashes makes even less sense than the other one.
I'll let it up to the listeners to decide which one they think it is. Anyways,
I mean, like Psychotalk is a good card, I guess.
But
I don't know about playing it in a white control deck, but it's a good card.
I mean, I'm just allergic to, you know, that I'm allergic to like drawing disenchant against, rock or goblins. It's just how I am.
I drew all my naturalizes against Jared Doucette in the LobsterCon Saturday tournament. Yeah, I drew them all though.
Yeah, I mean,
and then I drew all my duresses in that game too.
I probably just
I almost won, but I did not win.
I mean, I probably just need to like kind of change a little bit of my understanding about how these decks function. But so long as Vindicate is a available option to me, I really enjoy playing it. I just, like I said, I think it feels really good to like you and your opponent both have like 2 or 3 cards in hand. They're drawing lands and useless disenchants or like whatever, and you have like access to Vindicate. And you can stop what they're doing. It ends up being pretty good against decks like Threshgeddon, where like your plows don't always keep the Terravors at bay. So just having like a little bit more action against Terravor is like always good against control decks because
I guess you could kill most of their stuff.
Yeah, everything except for Nimble Mongoose.
This deck doesn't have Tormod script though, right?
It doesn't. No. Or we're back to Monson's deck. Yeah. You're cold to
Threshold. You're just like straight up once they get Threshold, they're eventually just going to beat you with like some 3/3s and 4/4s, I guess. Well, I guess if you got Exalted Angel and I guess they can plow it. You can't really stop that.
Yeah, I mean you still got game. Like if we're talking about this deck, you've got game, and then obviously if you're talking about a Psychotalk deck, you've got Psychotalk, blocks everything. So, and it even cleans up your graveyard for their Terravor. So they're relying on their own, and it was a Gush deck, so like whatever. Anyways, this is all conceptual. I still have to kind of figure out the last things that I'm trying to do with it. I basically just annihilated my Magic the Gathering Online window. But anyways, I think that should probably wrap it up for us. Junk on the rise, maybe. Could be interesting. I always felt like there was something there. Sounds like you're not a Pernicious Deed Source of Plowshares believer.
I mean, I am joyous. I would love to play a green or black based control deck with a Chroma's Vengeance.
Oh, should we actually do 5 minutes on the junk deck that you made?
I didn't make it. I played it.
Junk Life.
Junk Life. Let me find it though. Like Pro Tour Junk.
No. Junk Life. Your survival life deck.
my deck? I don't have it handy. Do you have it handy?
No, I don't have it.
Pull it up.
Handy.
Oh wait. We have it in the team Discord. Right?
Like I said, like 5 minutes. You just have this life deck. It's a survival life deck with Gaia's Blessing, and you have this like insane like my deck is going to only be Gaia's Blessings and Abeyances. It's just like I'll never lose to opposing Gaia's Blessing. No longer important because of course there's basically no Guy's Blessing decks left in the format, at least not enough for it to matter.
Yeah, when I made it, I was just like I originally made this deck after LobsterCon last year, and Devourer was the best combo deck. So this deck could like basically never lose to Devourer, right? So
yeah, and then you brought it to a meetup because you thought that I was going to bring Devourer, and you were still on the paradigm of like only bring decks that defeat lanes.
And then so I ended up losing to Etai playing 12 stuff. I got one of the games though.
Yeah, that game was actually on bootleg coverage on my Twitch.
So, and then I ended up losing. Weirdly, I lost to Roland playing Mono Red, where
should be unlosable.
Yeah, it's like 100% win rate if you get to the fourth turn. So I don't know how I didn't win because I kept a hand when I got to the fourth turn and I didn't win. So
yeah, do you think there's anything there for the life strategy or?
I mean, it depends. If people are going to play red decks with no disruption, right? Like not like Will Hurst with his Wastelands or whatever. If you think they're going to give you 4 turns, and they don't even have to give you 4 turns, you can just like put nomads or whatever in front of their guys. It's like you can have a non game ending combo that is still infinite toughness, right? So one of the ways I beat Etai was I just put 2 guys out, and I'm like, you can't
block.
Really,
yeah,
you can't really win, right? Like, why can't I win? I was like, because you need every time I play a guy, you need to play another 12/12. Yeah. And like I walked him through it, he's just like, oh wow, I literally need to play another 12/12, right?
Yeah.
Like so.
Yeah, so for the listeners who are unaware, Life is a combo deck that uses the interaction between Nomads in Core and Daru Spiritualist or Spiritualist in Vec, or I don't even know.
Or Task Force.
Task Force and
so whatever. Yeah, you make one guy has a 0.
One guy has a 0 mana activated ability. The other guy has a triggered ability that when it gets targeted, it gets toughness plus O plus 2 or plus O plus 3. You make it get infinite toughness. You sacrifice it to Starlit Sanctum to give you infinite life. Or what Mike's describing is like you can also just block.
Yeah. So like if you're playing against 12/12, if you play a guy, they need to play another 12/12. They're just like, can I get through with meddling mages? I'm like, what would you even name?
Yeah.
And he's just like, what is this thing called? I'm like, I have a bunch of different things that
they all have different names.
Yep. They have different names. Right. He's like, which one costs 1?
Yeah. Yep, smart kid. He knows to name the lower costed one with meddling.
So so you just like put stuff out and then like they can't really get through. So and the other thing is like I guess they could potentially get you a stifle, but if you have like 3 copies of the combo out, which is like you don't use your combo copies, you just put them out there, right?
Yeah.
So like you could just try to go off again. They can't really, they need to have a stifle each time because Starlit Sanctum isn't a spell.
Yep.
So
yeah, I mean interesting deck. We'll see if there's anything.
One of the best decks, like if it gets developed. No, I'm serious. Like, why wouldn't it be one of the best decks? Like, it's a turn 2 win in a lot of matchups.
You just lost. It's because you lost to Etai. I don't know.
I mean, everybody loses to Etai.
It's true.
Maybe I should have Mox Diamond. I played Lotus Petal instead of Mox Diamond. I know you're a Mox Diamond guy, but Lotus Petal seemed better to me.
How are you gonna get the extra lands to feel Mox Diamond?
I'm not. That's why I played Lotus.
You're just going to try to win. Yeah. I think, I mean, it'd be interesting to explore. It's kind of interesting that nobody actually like literally no one tells you. I haven't seen anyone make a list. I barely saw your list. And it's just something that you've been high on since last LobsterCon, like the LobsterCon before last, that you were just like, isn't this like an amazing deck? And we have yet to prove it. So hopefully.
Yeah. Cause I mean, especially if like I'm the only one who's even thinking about it. Right. Then nobody else is really like bringing it into the crucible. And I've been playing 12/12 primarily recently. So
yeah, you're just stuck on blue red. Well,
so what are you going to
do? Brave new world of pre-modern strategies. Excited to see what's next.
Ooh, is this your deck? That deck looks good. That deck looks really good. Go back to that one.
For the
Yep. Wait, so let's look at this. Now what's this deck has? What are these just weird screenshots now?
I'm just looking at different monthly decks. I just started flipping through monthly decks, but yeah, there's been a few 12/12 players.
I am a member of Pre-Modern Online Play. There's deck lists in this group.
Yeah, they're kind of hard to peg down, but yeah, for anybody listening, if you want some sweet pre-modern deck lists, it's always a good idea to check out Pre-Modern Online Play. Every month there's a post that goes through the decks that made the top cut. It hasn't been updated in a little bit because these look a little bit old. Either that or they're just hiding in another spot on the Facebook that I can't locate. But you can find Kyle Monson's deck there. Or you can just bother me on Discord and I'll just point you in the right direction. Somebody hit me up and was like, hey, why do you guys keep on referencing gears? Like, what's a gear? And
oh, wow.
I had the pleasure of directing them to your soon to be landmark article, Finding the Three Gears, which you can read on Cool Stuff Inc. By Michael J. Flores. But
if you buy anything on Cool Stuff Inc., you should use promo code Flores for 5% off anything in the store. By the way, I don't get anything.
You don't know kickbacks.
I don't get anything for that. You should still use it.
Yeah. Well, this has been Spy Colony number 10. We made it to 10 episodes. Big thank you to all the listeners for supporting our hour-long rants on whatever topics. I think people are going to get a kick. I think junk is a pretty exciting archetype, so I'm excited to see what happens.
Do you know what's exciting? You know who was messaging me while we were recording this episode?
Ryan David Marshall.
Roman Fusco. Do you know why?
Oh, because of Ancestral Recall. Oh,
yeah,
big shout out. Keep your podcast ears open for the return of the Ancestral Recall podcast, hosted by Michael J. Flores and Roman Fusco. Personally, my favorite all-time Magic podcast. Nothing comes even close. The backlog is evergreen. You can always go back and listen to it. Just skip through the first 10 minutes of Mike bowling Roman at the top of every episode when you can get to the actual article read. I absolutely love this podcast. I can't wait to find out what article that you guys
I'll tell you right now.
Iron Man versus Hulk.
He's posting it right now, so it'll be up before this podcast goes up.
All right.
We did Information Cascades by Patrick Chapin.
Okay, that's awesome. I'm looking forward to listening to that. Be sure to check that out. That's Ancestral Recall, wherever you find podcasts. And this has been Spy Colony number 10. So thank you so much for listening.
And I want to shout out to Fran. If Fran hadn't made a really nice comment in our Discord, we wouldn't have recorded it. So shout out to Fran. Shout out to Roman. So many podcasts. So much Magic the Gathering.
Yeah. Pre-modern is great and seems like it will continue to be great. Thanks again. Love Spy Colony.
Love Mike. Bye.
Game over.